Hello students. So in the last class we discussed about ecosystem. What do you mean by an ecosystem? How different components of an ecosystem interact, like biotic and abiotic components, and what are biotic and what are abiotic components. How does a ecosystem functions? What are producers? What are consumers? And what are decomposers? We discussed this. So now let's discuss about food chains and food webs. So each step or level of a food chain forms a trophic level. The autotrophs or the producers are the first trophic levels. That is the autotrophs, that is those who prepare their own food. So they are the first at the food chain. They fix up the solar energy and make it available for the heterotrophs or the consumers. So with the help of in the presence of the solar energy, make their food and they make it available for heterotrophs and or the consumers. And the herbivores or the primary consumers come at the second, small carnivores or the secondary consumers at the third, and the larger carnivores or the tertiary consumers at the fourth trophic level. So you can see in this figure, like the first is the producers, and then the primary consumers, then the secondary consumers, and then the tertiary consumers. So the producers are basically the plants, that is the autotrophs, and then the primary consumers are like the herbivores or the primary consumers, and then the second is the small carnivores, and the third the last one, that is the fourth, that is the tertiary level, is tertiary consumer, that is the large carnivores. So we know that the food we eat acts as a fuel to provide us energy to do work. So whatever we eat, that is broken down into energy, that is broken down to produce energy. So whatever food we eat, that gives us energy. And thus the interactions among various components of the environments involves flow of energy from one component of the system to another. So in other words, we can also say that the interaction of different level of organisms, or the interaction among the various components of the environment, that is abiotic and biotic components, leads to the exchange of transfer or the exchange of energy from one component to another. So as we have studied that the autotrophs capture the energy present in the sunlight and convert it into chemical energy. We have already discussed how plants basically absorb sunlight with the help of in the presence of chlorophyll, absorb and break it down into glucose. So how plant produces energy, breaks it down into energy with the help of in the presence of the sunlight, by trapping of the solar energy. So this energy supports all the activities of the living world. So basically, since since plants are the autotrophs which make their own foods, they are at the bottom of the pyramid, this entire food pyramid. So we can also say that they are the first who produces energy, and they lay the foundation for the production of energy for the entire food pyramid. So flow of energy from capture the energy present in the sunlight and convert it into chemical energy. This energy supports all the activities of the living world. So this is the first energy that is produced. From autotrophs, the energy goes to the heterotrophs and decomposers. However, we can, as we saw in the previous chapter on sources of energy, when one form of energy is changed to another, some energy is lost to the environment in forms which cannot be used again. So I believe you must have studied in the previous chapter, you will be studying that whenever energy is flown from one component to another, there is a flow of energy. Some part of the energy is always lost, and that cannot be used. You can say that that part of the energy is wasted. So out of 100%, we can say that at least 98% or 97% of the energy is used, and the rest 3% is wasted. So the flow of energy between various components of the environment has been extensively studied, and it has been found that, so we'll be studying it further. What has been found: the green plants in a terrestrial ecosystem capture about 1% of the energy of the sunlight that falls on the leaves and convert it into food energy. So what is basically seen is all the studies that has been conducted for the flow of energy from one components to another. is that the plant basically capture only 1% of the solar energy and breaks it down into food energy. When green plants are eaten by primary consumer, a great deal of energy is lost as heat to the environment. So when the heterotrophs consume the autotrophs or the consume the plants, a huge amount of energy is lost to the environment, and the same goes into the digestion and in doing work, and the rest goes towards growth and reproduction. Average of 10% of the food eaten is turned into its own body and made available for the next level of the consumer. So whatever amount of energy is taken in, only 10% is utilized by the heterotroph. Therefore, 10% can be taken an average value for the amount of organic matter that is present at each step and reaches the next level of consumer. So we can say that we can take an average of 10% of the 10% to be the energy that is to be retained by a consumer or a heterotroph or a carnivore or a small carnivore or a large carnivore, that is on the basically on all the three levels of the food pyramid. So we can say that 10% is an average. Since so little energy is available for the next level of consumers, food chain generally consists of only 3 to 4 steps. So as we see that in the average is so less that the food pyramid or the food chain cannot be more than 3 to 4 consumers. So the loss of energy at each step is so great that very little unusable energy remains after 4 trophic levels. And there are generally a greater number of individuals at the lower trophic level of an ecosystem, and the greatest number is of the producers. The length and the complexity of the food chains vary greatly. Each organism is greatly eaten by 2 or more other kinds of organisms, which in turn are eaten by several other organisms. So instead of a straight line food chain, the relationship can be shown as a series of branching lines called a food chain. So what happens is, a consumer animal or organism is not consumed by only a single consumer. It is consumed by multiple consumers. So it is basically, the relationship is in a form of a web-like structure, and that's why it is known as a food web. So you can see at this figure 15.3 how so many animals are interlinked. The producers are the same. The plants are the producers, that is autotrophs, but how every organism is interrelated. So from the energy flow diagram, that is 15.2, things become clear. Firstly, the flow of energy is unidirectional. The flow of energy is always unidirectional, that is from bottom to top. The energy that is captured by the autotroph does not revert back to the solar input, and the energy which passes to the herbivores does not come back to the autotrophs. As it moves progressively through the various trophic levels, it is no longer available to the trophic previous level. So once the energy is moved on, it cannot be reverted back. It does not travels back. Secondly, the energy available at each trophic level gets diminished progressively due to the loss of E at each level. As we talked about, that at an average of 10% is only retained by the consumer. So at every level there is a decline in the amount of energy that is stored, and by the time it reaches the top of the level, that is the tertiary consumer, it completely gets off, or it completely vanishes. Another interesting aspect of food chain is how unknowingly some harmful chemicals enter our body through the food chain. You have read it in class 9 how water gets polluted. So some of the harmful materials also get into our body through pollution. One of the reasons to use is the use of the several pesticides and other chemicals to protect our crops from diseases and pests. And these animals are either washed down into the soil or into the water bodies. From the soil, these are absorbed by the plants along with water and minerals, and from the water bodies, these are taken up by the aquatic plants and animals. This is one of the ways in which they enter the food chain. All these chemicals are non-degradable. These get accumulated progressively at each trophic level. As human beings occupy the top level in any food chain, the maximum concentration of these chemicals get accumulated in our bodies. This phenomenon is known as biological magnification. So, as human beings are at the top of the food chain, the maximum concentration of these chemicals, that is through the plants, through the primary consumers, then the secondary consumer, and then the tertiary consumer. So human beings, at the being the tertiary consumer, has the highest concentration of this chemicals, and this is known as biological magnification. This is the reason why our food grains such as wheat and rice, vegetables and fruits, and even meat contain varying amount of pesticide residues, and they cannot always be removed by washing or other means. So in the next class, we'll study how do our activities affect the environment. Thank you.